Hey, what's up, guys? I'm Jacob Phillips with Team 20, and our presentation was on contributor mining. So I used to be at Perennial, I'm at Perennial right now, an Arbitrum protocol. Used to lead governance at Polychain. Along with me on my team was Louis. He also works with me at Perennial. He's gotten hired from a DAO forum twice and was the first contributor at a DAO. And then ZER8 also worked with us remotely, and ZER8 led one of the first sort of retroactive grant programs for the Arbitrum DAO. And the message here is let's get the contributors paid. So the basic idea here, like the kind of basic pitch, is like we did this big STIP program for liquidity, but what if we did this instead for governance contributors? We started funding, people working for the DAO, people coming up with new proposals, whatever else. Kind of like this GovHack, but at a much, much bigger scale. So, you go to the DAO and you say, hey, Arbitrum ecosystem needs some liquidity. You get $100 million. You go and ask for contributors or to get some shit done, and you get like, $5 or a lot of scrutiny. And so the idea here is like, what if we took like some version of this GovHack where it's like, hey, come here, come up with some ideas, some solutions. Even like listening to these presentations before this, it's interesting. Like, there's all these things that need to be solved with the DAO. Everybody realizes this, but nobody's stepping in to do it. And we all kind of showed up here for free to sort of come up with some ideas. But imagine if we took this to the next level, how many proposals we could get through. So this is sort of the problem statement. I think the DAO's most significant problem is that there's just not enough people contributing. Some people kind of come and go. They come when it's convenient. They come when it's helpful for their business interest, but they don't stick around after. And I think a lot of this is because the incentives are weak. I mean, it's one of those things where it's like contributing to DAOs isn't all about money, but I think money certainly helps, right? Like where you choose to spend your time is at least in part influenced by, what happens here. And frankly, I think like a lot of us in this room today are going to go back to, focus on other jobs after this. But if the incentives were right, maybe we'd stick around longer. I think this the ARB GovHack that just happened here highlights that, a lot of this stuff isn't rocket science. Some of it is rocket science, so we need the right people certainly. But a lot of this is we just need to sit down and think through this, right? Like what a good proposal structure should be, what the onboarding structure should look like what Arbitrum biz dev should look like. All these things are we just need the right people to sit down and kind of hash this out. And incentives certainly help do that. So real quick, what is contributor mining? So the whole idea, DAOs are slow, contributor mining speeds them up. We all imagine DAOs as the future of work, but right now they're like clunky and there's a lot of problems with them. But in the same way, liquidity mining, 10x the speed of liquidity movement throughout DeFi, I think we could do the same for governance. And at a high level, it's like this can kind of mean anything. I really just think this is like above market talent acquisition costs. So it can be everything from hiring to retroactive airdrops to something more algorithmic like source cred. So our solution is the human capital DAO, and the whole idea here is like, we thought of more crazy solutions, but the most practical thing is basically to create a team to run these contributor incentive programs. And the idea is that the real North Star is like a culture shift within the Arbitrum DAO. So as where before, it's kind of hard to get contributor incentives, we want to start and like really use this DAO to prove set the precedent that contributors, you come contribute to the Arbitrum DAO and you'll get paid in a big way. And I think that'll onboard the next wave of contributors. And last thing at the bottom, the real KPI here is to onboard people long-term, not just short-term, even though, some short-term inevitably comes from this. So again, we sort of thought of this in a big way, like let's do like a big multi-million-dollar proposal just to make stuff happen in a short term. That would be really cool. But the real answer here is that, for safety, we kind of want to start slow. So we start with milestone 1, which is just we establish the team and onboarding flow basically. So if we want to keep people around long-term and retain talent, we need to have a lot of structure and infrastructure in place to make that happen. I think it was team 11 or team 8 or something like that did the whole onboarding flow. We should probably partner with them. I think they'd help us out a lot. And milestone 2 is let's put this into action. Let's try some experiments. We'll start small with maybe a 100K program, or I'd even run a GovHack back round 2 with a 500K prize or something like that and kind of see where we go. And then milestone 3 is let's scale this thing up, 10x. The STIP program was $100 million, $100 million after ARB token price rise. I could imagine the same. I could imagine us doing the same sort of governance mining program down the road when the time's right. But we'll sort of grow up gradually, start 100K, then do 500K, then do maybe $1 million, and maybe a year from now when we're running this back, we'll be talking about the big kahuna.
Excellent. Thanks for that great presentation. All right, but before we move on to our final presentation, we're going to ask the crowd for any questions. We've got one over here from Izzy. I'm going to bring you the mic.
Yeah, I 100% agree with what you just presented there, and it makes a lot of sense. And actually goes along with it, something that can be integrated to that governance hub that we were talking about earlier.
Yep.
But I've seen a lot of programs basically do something like this, and it ends up like devaluing the work that's being put in. I'm pretty sure that you guys already have the metrics, like how to kind of gauge how to give the rewards to the contributors. But there's also a saying is like when the metric becomes a target, it fails to be a good metrics. But like what do you have in place to kind of like vent like the value or the impact that the contributors are contributing?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. And just to clarify, were you basically saying that like when you start throwing money at these problems,
Yes.
then you like change the game basically?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so there's a lot of like challenges here. The other thing you mentioned was like, how do you assign the value of impact? This is a really hard problem. This I'm kind of punting to the human capital DAO. I think there's some things that are like really obviously valuable. Like, you know, we could sort of assign some value to like, I don't know, like, hey, there's like, we could outline all the Arbitrum DAO's problems and we could sort of assign bounties to them and kind of, I don't know, see how that goes. I think the real challenge is like, you know, similar to like short-term liquidity programs, you run into this issue with if you start sending money to contributors in like a way, like people start kind of gaming it, trying to play the short-term game of I have to have short-term impact because that gets me paid. And what you really want is you want people to think about like, where is Arbitrum going to be in 2-3 years? How do I build for that? So, I mean, the simple answer is like, you do sort of vesting programs, you think about long-term incentives and you structure it that way. The longer answer is I don't totally know. But I think like SourceCred was doing some really cool stuff at one point, and I think the Coordinate team, or it was either Urine or the Coordinate team, I can't remember. They had this like really cool structure where for like anybody who came to the forum would somehow get paid through like SourceCred, and then they had like a smaller committee that for like part-time workers or people who were kind of like involved in a medium way, and then for like the short tail of contributors, the people really adding a ton of value, they had like a really small committee that would give out like massive grants. Well, I don't know how big they were, but big grants. So I think there's all these things I think are something that we just kind of need to sit down and hash out. And frankly, it's like a game of experimentation. Probably the first 2 or 3 answers don't work.